Hi. I had an idea for a video that's not just me sitting and reading a book to the camera, and so I'm going to do it. And since it's not just me sitting and reading a book to the camera, I'm going to take the opportunity to remind anyone watching, or tell anyone watching for the first time, Cupid Takes a Holiday, my novel, still available on Amazon. There should be a link in the description below. Won't take you long to read. I think it's fun. It's kind of a play on Death Takes a Holiday, but very, very different. So there's that, and also I'll take this opportunity to mention that I will have another book on Amazon, probably in mid-October, tentatively titled Mostly Santa, Christmas Stories. And it's a compilation of Christmas stories that I've written over the years, but expanded upon. I just, the other day, added dialogue to one of them that described conversations, but I fleshed out the conversations. So not just the stuff that can still be seen on my blog, and some stuff that has never been seen on my blog. So I will probably make a video about that when the time comes. This video is about binders. I think it was started pre-pandemic, but one of the pandemic projects of mine was printing out physical copies of pictures from the digital age of photography, which is to say nearly every picture that I have ever taken, so that I have physical copies of them and putting them into binders. And I guess I started to really like, I'd always really liked binders because it's just a convenient place to store paper, and I like to keep essays, and I like to have printed copies of some of my better blog posts or novels that aren't on Amazon. But putting other things in binders, I guess I used to put sports cards and Pokemon cards in binders, so I guess it's always been a thing, but I never thought, I used to scoff at the idea of putting playbills in binders, in part because I felt like it meant if I started putting playbills in binders, I would have to put all my playbills in binders, and then it's too many binders. Playbills take up space. Binders for playbills take up more space. Slightly more space, but still. But over the pandemic, I think that I got used to large binders because I get 400 pictures per binder, to have fewer binders, but they're still very large, but I got used to them. And so it was less of a thing. And also, I keep my playbills in New York and the ones up at my parents' house, that collection is mostly my grandparents' playbills, which is a very large collection, in crates, in boxes. It's hard to get to them. It's hard to enjoy them. And I don't know, I can't speak for all theater goers, but I like to enjoy playbills beyond just when I'm sitting in the theater. So in that sense, I started looking seriously at playbill binders, but I still didn't like the idea of putting all of my playbills into binders and then having to have a shelf that's just playbill binders. I'll show you the spine. It's nice, the little gilded playbill word up there, but it's not. I mean, I got bookshelves full of books. They're colorful. They pop. That doesn't. So I didn't want a shelf full of that. But there were certain playbills that I thought I'd like to be able to look at them more often than I do, but not have to go through digging them out of wherever they are. And also, when you have a ton of playbills, they can get lost just in the pile of playbills. So I got one, and I filled it up with 18 playbills. And as I was picking those 18 playbills, I saw other playbills that I thought, I wish I could, because I pretty much knew which playbills I was going to use before I got the binder. But as I was extracting them from the piles and from the nice wooden box, which is it's nice, but it's not convenient for display and going through because they're in there in piles. I saw other playbills that I thought, this is nice too. It's not nice enough that I'm going to replace one of the things that I'm attached to in my first binder, but maybe I'll get another binder. And so got a little bit of extra money, and I got another binder. And this time I had pre-picked the playbills out, and it was interesting. First 17 were easy, but picking the last one from a collection of about 10 proved difficult, and I think I made the right choice ultimately. And this whole thing also made me realize that I don't need my entire playbill collection in binders. I'm perfectly happy to have the rest of those playbills mostly out of sight. I have these binders I can show people if they come over. I can show them the highlights of my playbills, which is what I'm going to do here. But nobody needs to see that I went to see the Amelie musical or the Tootsie musical Um, I do tell people that I saw A Doll's House Part 2. In fact, I think I saw it twice. But anyway, without further ado, this is Playbill binder number 2 that I filled up yesterday. And so these are the ones that didn't make the first cut, but that I still wanted. And these are the last of the big 36, the 18 and 18 that I thought, yes, I want those. I don't need to have the others at my fingertips. So, and the order is deliberate. And it starts with Chita Rivera, The Visit. Now, I've been fortunate enough to see Chita Rivera in all 3 of her Broadway musicals since I started paying attention to Broadway. I did not see A Dancer's Life, which was her autobiographical review show, but I saw 9. I saw The Mystery of Edwin Drood practically every day when I was an usher at Studio 54, and I saw The Visit. I was very lucky to see The Visit. It's kind of a passion project for her, and I think it's also Kander and Ebb's last musical that they did together. So I figured to start with Chita Rivera, and she's on the cover, so it's very nice. Fiddler on the Roof, I think it's a really pretty cover. Kind of, it pops. That's a word I'm probably going to be using a lot. And Fiddler on the Roof is an important musical to me, and this particular production I saw, it was one of the few Broadway shows that I've gone to alone. I went on my birthday, I think, in 2015. Danny Burstein is a favorite, and it's one of my favorite musicals, so I wanted to have it on display just for people to look at it, because it's beautiful. This, I wouldn't call this cover beautiful, but I consider it very interesting, and again, pops because of the colors. You kind of see the heart there, the falsettos. An interesting musical by William Finn. And here's I think that's Andrew Rannells. And I believe that's Christian Borle. My first time seeing Christian Borle, my second time seeing Andrew Rannells on stage. And I really liked it. And again, the playbill is an interesting design. That's another thing. They pop, and if they're an interesting design. Some of them are just pretty, but or there's something else to the show that I wanted the playbill out to tell the story of. Come From Away, one of the last musicals I saw before the shutdown. It was a birthday present from the malevolent supernatural force I live with. And also a musical that had roots not in Rochester, where I'm from, but near Rochester. And it's the musical about on 9/11 when they were diverting planes. One of the planes was sent to this little town in Newfoundland, in Canada. And so it's an interesting, great musical, kind of chaotic toward the beginning, but eventually it slows down, and it's very nice. And it's interesting music, not your typical Broadway musical music. So that made the cut. A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. It's a fun musical, great cover, interesting source material. I enjoyed it. I saw it, and I met someone who became a friend at the show. And also, it was forward in my mind at this time because I quite embarrassingly left it out of my article for Onstage blog, 9 times musical theater nodded toward polyamory. And when people pointed that out, as people will tend to do with your mistakes on the internet, I was like, I've seen the show, I loved the show. It's kind of the opposite of recency bias. It wasn't as ingrained as something like A Kiss Me Kate or Phantom of the Opera. So it didn't spring immediately to mind. But it's one that I still have a little container. It initially had M&Ms in it. I don't know why they were handing out M&Ms, but it came from Gentleman's Guide. So I have a couple of souvenirs other than the playbill. But the playbill is beautiful, and I think most of these people are played by one actor in the show. I don't know exactly which ones necessarily, but there's that. Only Human. This was not a great show, but it was definitely a memorable experience because I think it must have been like an invited dress rehearsal. And it's a musical, it's an off-Broadway musical, theater at St. Clement's, where I had worked a couple of times by the time I saw this. Gary Busey plays God in this off-Broadway musical. And it's not great. It was ridiculous. I did have a good time. At intermission, the stairs to get down from the backstage to under the theater, where the actors have to go when they're not on stage, the stairs are treacherous, and Gary Busey's older and not the healthiest person. So at intermission, the lights come up after the lights go dark, and the lights come up, and Gary Busey is walking past the audience to get to safer stairs to take to the lower level. And he kind of looked up at us and grinned, like, I know, breaking the fourth wall or something like that. So it was a memorable show, and that's why it makes the cut. Some of these make the cut purely for the stories. That's a great story. Only Human. I wonder if there's any clips on YouTube. Gary, my third time, I think, seeing Nathan Lane. It was great, and it's a great cover. The next section, great cover illustrations, and also two of them, in two cases, people I know in the show. I mentioned theater at St. Clement's. I'd worked there a couple of times. One of the times I worked there was with Christine Nielsen, who I think initially she was playing the secondary role. There are two leads, and then there's a secondary role in Gary. She, I think, was originally playing the secondary role, and then one of the actor playing opposite Nathan Lane had to quit for some reason. I forget exactly what happened. I maybe should have looked that up. But Christine Nielsen was promoted to the role. She was probably already the understudy. That's sometimes how these things work. And she was promoted to the. So I was very happy to see that. And also, I just love the illustration. And again, it pops. It's a great design. It's clever. It's memorable. So it's worthy of display. Act 1, another musical. This one, like Gary, this is a play. Act 1 about Moss Hart, based on his memoir, Act 1. And it's a beautiful illustration. Lincoln Center playbill covers, always beautiful illustrations. That is presumably Moss Hart looking at the Music Box Theater, the Imperial Theater, and then the Claw Theater here, which is no longer there. But it would have been in Moss Hart's time, and so it was included in the illustration, which is a nice touch. And not only did I have a friend in this one, my friend Amy from Amy Warren from Schlemiel the First, which was my first New York City job, but she said a line in it that I actually wrote to her about before I knew anything about her role. I knew she was in the play, and I was reading the memoir at the time. And at some point, a character, I think Harriet Harris might be the name of that character, was a real person, not just a character, in the memoir says of Moss Hart's, of the reviews he gets at his first out-of-town tryout in Rochester, New York, where I'm from, she says something like, who cares what the reviewers say? This is Rochester. Nobody in Rochester knows anything except about Kodaks. And I wrote to Amy and said, is that line in the play? She said, yeah, it's one of mine. And so that was a great connection there. We went to see it, The Malevolent Supernatural Force and I, and we went down to the stage door afterwards, and Monk, Tony Shalhoub, the star of the play, walked right past us. I think he might have been confused. We didn't try to get his autograph. We weren't there to see him. We were there to see Amy. So that's that memory there. This is just another beautiful cover, and it's also, I figured, Rodgers and Hammerstein's got to be represented somewhere in here. And so this is the Rodgers and Hammerstein. The South Pacific cover is nicer, but my South Pacific playbill is up in Rochester because I saw it when I still lived in Rochester. I will do a binder for my Rochester playbills, but there are fewer of them, so they'll pretty much all get in. So there's no big story. It's a great musical, great production. Kelly O'Hara, I think it was my third time seeing her. She's wonderful. She finally won her Tony for this one. So that's playbill. Harvey Weinstein, one of my idols, one of the people whose career I would most like to emulate. However much it's not looking like I probably will. Recently read his memoir, I Was Better Last Night, and just great, interesting guy, and I was so happy to see this. It was a one-person play. He plays Bela Abzug, but he didn't dress in drag or anything. He just wore just all black, and he went around on the stage. He can't, I don't think, disguise his voice. So it was just him, but as her. And it was an interesting play. It was a very small theater, so he was right there, and I included it because, again, he's one of my idols. St. Joan. I fairly recently became a big fan of George Bernard Shaw, and I've always found Joan of Arc interesting. And this production happened it just happened, as productions will happen. So we went to see it. It was, I suppose, maybe if I'd read it first. I have the play. I just hadn't read it, and then I thought, oh well, I'll see it. So I don't want to read it before I see it. It's a little more mystical than the George Bernard Shaws that I had read, but so I think I came away not entirely getting it, but I plan to revisit. But it was a beautiful production. I remember very distinctly the set design, the costumes, the lights, all of it, and she was great in it. 6 Degrees of Separation, a play I've read. I very much like the movie, and Allison Janney is, she's great. The malevolent supernatural force I live with is a big fan of hers. And the best part of the production was that, thanks to Corey Hawkins and his interpretation of the role of the kid who's pretending to be Sidney Poitier's son, I forget the name of the character, but that's what the character's doing, made it so that I didn't think of Will Smith that whole time. Will Smith is the star of the movie. He plays the role in the movie, and if Will Smith does something, and this is going to sound very weird in current context, if Will Smith does something, you can't forget it. You can't forget that Will Smith did it. I'm referring to movie roles right now, primarily. But Corey Hawkins made it so that I didn't think of Will Smith the entire time. His interpretation was different, and it was just as great, and it stood on its own. And that was what I had been concerned about. There are certain roles that I go see them and I'm concerned, but I have this iconic version already in my head, but it worked, and I really and I'm glad it did, because now I have 2 great versions of that character that I can look back on. Eventually I'll be able to pop in the DVD of the Will Smith version anytime, but I have no trouble imagining and remembering Corey Hawkins' version, because it was different enough that it stands apart. Waitress was a musical that I didn't love, but I really love Jessie Mueller. And I kind of sort of met her when she was in Edwin Drood, and I was at Studio 54 as an usher, and she was very nice. And I knew that Sarah Bareilles, who wrote the score, was eventually going to take over. I did not want to see Sarah Bareilles in the role. I wanted to see Jessie Mueller. And so I did. I went to see it. It was another one that I went alone because Malevolent Supernatural Force wasn't particularly interested in, and it was just a me thing. So I was glad I got that. And the musical's not bad. It's just, it was one of those rare occasions where I was there for the actor and not the musical itself. Farinelli and the King, that's Mark Rylance, and his wife wrote the play. And I don't know specifically if she wrote it for him, but he starred in it on Broadway. And it was a very rainy day when we went to see this, the Malevolent Supernatural Force and I, and we had seats on stage. So we were dripping wet, and we were on stage. But, you know, because we were on stage, because we're seeing this play with this guy, of course, we didn't mind that we were dripping wet. At the end of the play, after the actors took their bows, they're going off stage, and he was walking past us, and he turns to us and says, maybe not just the 2 of us, maybe the whole audience in our section, but he kind of mouths, "Thanks for coming in the rain," or something like that. She heard it better than I did, but that's just that little extra bit of, like, the cherry on top of the cake, that encounter. Children of a Lesser God. An interesting play in the sense that it's about deaf people. It had deaf actors in it, and a lot of the dialogue was signed. Most of it, there were super titles, I think, projected above the stage, and one of the characters would often do that thing that sometimes happens when either a character is doing sign language or speaking in a non-English language in movies, where they'll, before saying his answer to what the deaf person is saying, he would repeat what she said. And there's an interesting story behind how the lead for this play was found, and I don't recall it well enough to say it with any confidence, but you can look it up. This was the revival production. And just the silent stretches during the sign language you don't get a lot of silent stretches when dialogue is going on in plays. If dialogue is going on, it's typically not silent. So that's just an interesting theatrical experience in itself. This was the 18th picked. I did not see both of these plays. I only saw No Man's Land, but it had Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, kind of a later in their lives dream team, thanks to the X-Men movies where they play Professor X and Magneto, frenemies as they are known. And No Man's Land, Waiting for Godot, they're not easy to understand plays. I remember being there. I know I saw it. I couldn't tell you much about it. But they were, of course, great, and it was great to see them because just such powerful performers, even though apparently I don't remember much about the play itself. School of Rock was a musical I was surprised that I liked so much because on the one hand it's Andrew Lloyd Webber, I love Andrew Lloyd Webber, on the other hand it's a musical based on a very popular movie, and my experience with such things has not been entirely satisfactory. But I found it not the best thing he's ever written, not the best thing ever written, but charming enough, certainly not as great as the movie, which, I mean, Jack Black makes that movie, and Alex Brightman's job in the Jack Black role was not enviable. And Sierra Boggess, I think is how the last name is pronounced, her job in the Joan Cusack role, not an enviable thing. But mostly it just hinges on the kids playing their instruments and whenever they said their lines. That was the charm of this musical, the key to it being just so much fun. The songs were fun. I don't remember most of them. I thought Sierra Boggess didn't really sing much during the first act, so at intermission I said, when she steps forward to sing, it's going to be a huge moment. And sure enough it was. And it's one of my favorite Andrew Lloyd Webber songs, Where Did the Rock Go? Find it, listen to it. I think it's the saddest song he ever wrote. Because it's so great, and she was wonderful doing it. And it's not in the kind of voice that you think of with her, but still wonderful. And this playbill is from the first time that I saw the Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. The second time that I saw it on tour a long time ago. But this was from the first time I saw it on Broadway. It was apparently 25 at the time. And I saw it with my uncle and his family. And you're going to hear that group of people referenced again. But yeah, it's my favorite musical. And this was my first time seeing the Broadway production, still running, after slightly more years than I've been running. So that was the second class, the playbills that I looked through when I was picking out for my first binder. I looked through them and I saw, I want to put these in a binder too. The first playbills, the ones that inspired me to get the binder in the first place, are in this one. This is A Lovely Sunday for Creve Coeur. I think it's the most beautiful playbill I've ever seen because of the cover art. And it's the play where I worked with Christine Nielsen before she was in Gary. And also a bunch of other wonderful people. But it's a Tennessee Williams play. It's not very well known. I like it a lot. I like it more than The Glass Menagerie. But apparently it is not considered one of his best. But I loved it, and I love the playbill, which is why it is the first playbill in the first binder. It is the one I think most worthy of display. I wrote around this time another thing for Onstage Blog. I'll put these Onstage Blog articles in the description, links to them. But just another thing that said, why are playbills abandoned? Because I wasn't the usher at the time, but I would watch the usher pick up the playbills that people just thrown on the floor, and I was thinking, at least put them in the recycling bin, but why not keep them? Why not keep this little piece of this experience that you've just had? You can't take the production home with you. Take the playbill home with you, or at least put it in the recycling. Don't make the usher have to pick it up and throw it away. Immediately after that play, I was working on this one backstage, David Arrow's one-man Bobby Kennedy show, and I don't think he knows that I took one of the ones that he had pre-signed, and in case people wanted signed playbills, but he wasn't around to do it. And it was like A Lovely Sunday. It was at Theater at St. Clement's, where I saw Gary Busey play God in an off-Broadway musical. And just a lot of fun. I also wrote one about how even if, I mean, it's David's show. He wrote it, he compiled it, the speeches, he acted it, and he's done it a couple of times. And then during the pandemic, we recorded a version of it. But there were little pieces of it that were mine. And the article is about how having that kind of, you get you have the job, you make the money to do the backstage stuff, the laundry, whatever I was doing, but a sign that I made, like a pro Bobby Kennedy type sign, a couple of them appeared in projections, in projected images. I assembled the podium that he used. And so those touches that the audience was seeing, I didn't paint it, someone else painted the podium, but those touches, it felt like I was in the production in a way, even though I wasn't. So there's that one. Shamil the First, I actually was in. It was my first Broadway, not Broadway, it was my first New York City job. And I was in it, I was in the ensemble, I was silent, I had to drag, there was either a clarinetist or a violinist around on a tarp. I had to move trees around, but I was on the stage. I had to roll a guy around in a wheelchair, almost dumped him into the orchestra pit at one performance, and not deliberately. But, of course, very fond memories. And my uncle wrote and arranged some of the music in it. And the songs are made up of mostly old klezmer songs. So that was a nice connection, too. It's also where I met Amy Warren, who I later saw in Act 1. I did not forget to put something here. I wanted these two to be facing each other so that they could do this as part of the display. Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, of course. I bought my ticket to both of these plays, parts 1 and 2, with proceeds from working on Lovely Sunday and Kennedy. And in that sense, it is appropriate that they follow them. Love the Harry Potter world. Wasn't sure that I wanted to spend 6 hours in a theater seeing a live production of a thing that wasn't based on one of the books. It's not as good as the Harry Potter books. It is better than the Fantastic Beasts movies, I will give it that. But leave Harry Potter alone for a while, I think. But it was more of a ride. It was more of the production special effects. That's why you would see Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, not necessarily for the story, which is sad, but also at times very cool. Now, I've seen How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, but I saw it with Daniel Radcliffe. That is a Jonas. I don't know which Jonas. I think it's Nick. This is from when my uncle went to see it. I didn't join him and his family for this one. I think it's his favorite musical. I'm not positive on that. But I did give him the Abe Burrows biography after I finished reading it, because it had a lot in there that I thought he would appreciate. I have the Daniel Radcliffe playbill up in Rochester. It will go in that binder eventually. I don't have the Darren Criss playbill, and somebody said at one point that they would be able to get one for me, and I never did. I would love to have all three, and I would probably include the Darren Criss playbill. Maybe I'd put it here like I have the Harry Potter ones, but apparently you don't want to stretch these too much. But yeah, the Harry Potter one, blue background, Daniel Radcliffe, blue tie, a Darren Criss yellow tie, yellow background. So kind of an indication of how these things can change based on the actor. Not just the production changes based on the actor being in it, but the whole design, the whole look of the character, and even the playbill. So I really like that. We're entering the signed playbill section. And I think the next one are playbills. I got 2 copies signed. One for my mom for Mother's Day, and one for myself. Bryan Cranston at the time, my whole family was really into Breaking Bad, and it was Mother's Day around the time that I saw the play, and so I said, and I got a recording of this, an audio recording of me saying, one for Mother's Day, one for me, and he goes, one for Mother's Day, and then he asked how to spell her name, and then he said her name out loud on the recording. I don't know, I think I still have that recording somewhere, but she was, I think, more thrilled about the recording of him saying her name than about the signed playbill. And this is another along those lines. The third was Alan Cumming in Macbeth, which I don't have in here, but she was really into The Good Wife at the time. This is Ciarán Hinds, and I got one for her as well. Ciarán Hinds, among many things, most recently, prominently Belfast, but he was Mr. Rochester in the version of Jane Eyre that I grew up with, that my mom really loves, opposite Samantha Morton as Jane Eyre. My favorite version of Jane Eyre and my favorite version of Rochester. And so I got Ciarán Hinds' autograph for myself and for my mom. I also got Tavi Gevison. Sorry, I got her name wrong, probably, but she came out, and I joked with her, because she's very, very small, and Ciarán Hinds is huge, and so I joked with her, just saying it was kind of cruel of them to have you take your bow standing next to Ciarán Hinds, and she appreciated that. Did not get Saoirse Ronan, but I was only there for Ciarán Hinds, really. Trip to Bountiful. I don't think Cecily Tyson's autograph is on here, but, and I don't exactly remember whose, but I think Condola Rashad's is. She played she played the younger role in the show. She was also Saint Joan in the other one, and I think I saw her also in Doll's House Part 2, and I might have seen her. She's done a lot, but Cecily Tyson was the main attraction here. That's how they were selling the play. And I feel very fortunate to have gotten to see her on stage. Didn't get her autograph. I think this is Vanessa Williams, and I don't know exactly who these autographs are. Other people wanted to stay for autographs, so I did, and I got my playbill signed, but I didn't pay that much attention. But it was a wonderful play, and in the middle of the play, Cicely Tyson's character, I forget the name, starts singing a hymn, and then all around me, I'm up in the balcony, all around me and down in the orchestra, I start hearing this humming like the audience is joining in, and they apparently knew the hymn, and then suddenly she's acknowledging that they're singing back to her, and she's kind of leading the choir, and it was I didn't know the hymn, I didn't start singing, nobody around the group that I was with, I don't think, started singing, any of them at all, but we were all there kind of having this magical, immersive experience in the middle of this classic play. And so that's more than the autographs, that's why this one makes the cut. I think I got just about the whole cast of Allegiance, including George Takei and Lea Salonga. The musical was not perfect, but it was important and very interesting, and I got to talk to George Takei just a tiny little bit as he signed my playbill. And I also think it's a beautiful cover. Like the past couple of covers, black and white photographs, not the best covers, but the experience or the autograph is why it's there. I love this cover, and I got that pin. They were selling that pin. I collect pins as well, and I love the chrysanthemum American flag. I missed out on an opportunity to get it on DVD. Eventually I will. Hands on a Hard Body is another interesting musical, and I think that you haven't used the word pops in a long time, but I think that the playbill really pops. You don't see a lot of orange and yellow. Well, all the playbills have yellow, but you don't see a ton of this kind of thing. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But it was an interesting musical. It's a country western flavor, and I think it got, that same season was Kinky Boots and Matilda, and I think it got buried by those two, which got a lot of attention and enthusiasm. Rightfully so, at least in Matilda's case. I still have no idea about Kinky Boots. But this was the one that I was rooting for. It was the one that I found the most interesting. A musical about red state people doing red state things and getting to know them, and I think that might have hurt it. I didn't get the playbill signed, but my copy of the cast recording is signed by all of them because I went to the CD release party and I got it signed. They were all there. A couple of them were not there. I love the songs in it. My favorite one is I'm Gone, but there's also Stronger, Born in Laredo, It's a Fix, just hit after hit. And again, not the kind of songs that you would typically hear on Broadway. The Mystery of Edwin Drood, aforementioned because of, well, I don't think I mentioned it during Cheetah Rivera, but I did. Cheetah Rivera was in this, Jessie Mueller, when I met her, was during this. I was an usher. I saw nearly every performance, and I think nearly every combination of, it's a choose-your-own-adventure musical, and the audience votes on who the characters become and how the musical ends. So very interesting. In that way, I met Rupert Holmes and had a couple of chats with him, and I'd hoped that he would become more of a mentor, and he said send him emails and things, but eventually, and I did, But he's a very busy guy. Eventually, I gave up. But if you're watching, Rupert, I still would love any feedback on anything that you'd be willing to give. He referred to me as the fifth Beatle cast member because as the audience would leave, we ushers were supposed to call out the final tallies for who murdered Edwin Drood. And I, the others, they did it. I made a show of it. I developed jokes over time. So he referred to me as, I think maybe that means I'm Pete Best. I don't know. For some reason, that's the name I came up with. Harvey was also at Studio 54. It was the first Studio 54 show that I was an usher for. Jim Parsons was Elwood Dowd, and kind of like, what was the first one that I mentioned? Kind of like School of Rock and the Jack Black role. Harvey is a favorite movie of mine, and Jimmy Stewart is the iconic Elwood Dowd. And so I had previously said to the malevolent supernatural force Jeff Goldblum could fill those shoes. I wasn't sure about Jim Parsons. He made the role his own, just like, I guess this is what actors do. They made the role. I can't say that Alex Brightman has made any of the roles. I've seen him do his own. They've maybe been harder tasks than Elwood P. Dowd and the lead character in 6 Degrees of Separation, but Jim Parsons definitely did. And I saw nearly every performance of that, too. This Sondheim has to be represented somewhere. And this was one of the first shows, might have been the first Broadway show that I saw after moving to New York City. I saw it in celebration for booking Schlemiel I. And it was great. Bernadette Peters was in it. A lot of great people were in it. Danny Burstein. But it made the cut, not because I loved the musical, or particularly loved the production, but because it's one of the most beautiful Playbill covers I've ever seen. And so, yeah, I've shown Bernadette Peters the way to the bathroom in one way or another on 2 separate occasions, 2 subsequent years, because she was rehearsing a musical next to the rehearsal room where we were rehearsing Schlemiel I, and she came out to use the bathroom, and I happened to be standing in front of the door, so I had to get out of her way. That's kind of showing her where it is. And then she came to an opening night or some special shindig at Studio 54 while I was there, and asked me where the bathroom was then, too. So, and I also met her after Gypsy and got her autograph. The Gypsy playbill with her autograph will be in the Rochester binder. She's one of my favorites. This show I made a point to when I had made enough tips, just from tips, as an usher at Studio 54, I got a ticket to the very back row to see Porgy and Bess, because I wanted to see Audra McDonald and Norm Lewis, and I did, and it was wonderful. It was an interesting production, kind of scaled down from the full operatic version that I guess was recently done at the Metropolitan Opera, but seeing Audra McDonald is on any musical theater lover's list of things to do. And Norm Lewis should be as well if it's not. And I've seen him a couple of times. I saw him at, they did a studio recording of Frank Wildhorn's Dracula musical, and he played, I think, Van Helsing. And so he was at the thing, and he sang one of the songs. I don't really remember it very well, the song, but I do remember him. I had asked a question about vampire musicals and why they don't tend to do well on Broadway. I love vampires and I love musicals. And the audience kind of groaned because I was pointing out that the Dracula musical had not done well on Broadway. Frank Wildhorn, he kind of defended me and gave his answer, and then Norm Lewis gets up there and he says, maybe a Blackula musical next? So that still has not happened, but I hope it, if he really wants it, I hope it does happen. I saw, what's her name? She was in Parliament in England for a while. Let me just... the 2019 revival. Just Googling quickly. Glenda Jackson. First I saw a preview for this, and then I saw... it was an invited dress rehearsal. And so I just had the ticket. I didn't get a playbill. But then I got another ticket, and I went and saw it again. That time I got a playbill, and this is the playbill. And just seeing, an actor as old as she was, with the life that she had led, playing one of the landmark roles in theater, especially for older actors, one of those unforgettable experiences. I didn't love the production. I loved most of the actors, um, but seeing her do it. Oh, and Ruth Wilson, right? Not Rita Wilson. They are different people. Ruth Wilson was the Fool / Cordelia, my two favorite roles in King Lear, and she was wonderful too, and I'm a huge fan of hers. Fun Home, an important original musical from probably my favorite modern composer of musicals, Janine Tesori. I saw it because a friend on Facebook said, I can't go see Fun Home, but I've got a ticket. Anybody want it? Free of charge. And I jumped on it. And my brother happened to be in town seeing another show, also at the Public, but in a different theater, at the Public Theater. A different little house. I think the smaller one. This was in the main house. Wonderful, interesting score. I had actually told Alison Bechdel wrote the graphic memoir that the musical is based on, and I had told her previously, and I went to a talk and signing that she gave. I said that the way she talked about comics and how they're kind of the looked down upon stepchildren of the arts world because they're not writing, they're not art, they are a combination of the two. That's not one of the high arts. I said, I feel that's kind of how musicals are. They're not dance, they're not music, they're not theater. They're a slightly less respected alliance of those three things. And I don't think at the time there was a plan for a Fun Home musical, but I also don't take credit for there being a Fun Home musical, because she had said it as part of her talk that she had turned down offers to have it turned into a movie. I don't think that she wanted it reinterpreted. But that's my interesting connection to that one. And then I ended with Phantom of the Opera again. This is from the second time I saw it on Broadway, not right before the pandemic, but about a month and a half before everything shut down. I saw it either on my birthday or the day before my birthday or the day after my birthday. I forget. The tickets in the playbill and the playbills in the plastic, so I can't check at the moment. The playbill, the Phantom cover changes, obviously, every 5 years or so. And it is still to this day my favorite. So those are, in 45 minutes or less, the 36 playbills that I want to be able to show people and just look at myself and remember going to the productions. And like I said, I'll probably eventually get one for the playbills for the musicals that I saw between the beginning of going to New York City to see musicals and when I moved to New York City. And I think I'm also planning to get one with larger sleeves for larger playbills for selections from my grandparents' collection, because playbills weren't always the size that they are now. They used to be bigger and wouldn't fit in the sleeves that I have. So that's at least 2 more binders. But I think I will stop there because the binders are big and bulky and heavy once they're filled with playbills. And I don't want too many of those. And I also... Some playbills are genuinely more special than others. I want to keep the playbills that I have as a record of whatever, a record of what I've seen, or some of them I received from friends, or won or bought. But I also want to elevate some. Yeah, so thank you for watching if you've made it this far. Yeah, I'll try to remember the Onstage blog articles that I referenced and put them in the description if you want to read more about musicals, playbills, experiences from me. Other than that, tomorrow is Wednesday's Child is Full of Poe, and Friday is Fairy Tale Friday, so look for those videos, and have a good afternoon.